So when I was a kid, my mom and stepdad had gay and lesbian friends. 2 of each, to be specific. Jen and Kelly, their lesbian friends, and John and Steve, their gay friends. I don't remember thinking of them as really any different from my parents' other friends, although I do remember once asking my mom how Jen and Kelly, how they what, my mom said. How do they do it? I guess they do whatever feels good, my mom said. Oh, okay, I thought. And then a moment later, wait, what does that mean exactly? So my mom and stepdad never made a big deal out of the fact that these friends were gay, but I only spent half my time with my mom and stepdad. The other half of my time, 3 or 4 days every week, I spent with my father. My dad is big, assertive, very opinionated, and he seemed nearly impossible to please. And I craved his approval more than anything. I believe it was in the course of some conversation about my mom's gay friends that my dad said, there's nothing wrong with being gay, but I will be disappointed if you turn out gay. When I found myself starting to think about boys from school right around the beginning of this period, I didn't consider for a moment that I might be attracted to them. I thought I simply wanted to be like them. I wanted to be popular like them and to have straight teeth and cool clothes. In middle school, when I started actually imagining myself with guys, I thought it was because I hadn't been with a girl yet, and so I was simply imagining the kind of body I was already familiar with. In high school, when I first dated and kissed a girl and still found myself aching with lust for guys, I concluded that all those years of imagining guys had simply become a kind of bad mental habit, something unconnected from my real desires, which of course were for women. So I decided that I needed to break this habit, and I needed to do it alone. So I began to devise punishments for myself. Every time I thought about a guy while masturbating, I wouldn't be allowed to play Civilization Call to Power on the computer for a week. Every time I looked at a guy in the locker room after swim practice, I wouldn't be allowed to eat chips and salsa for 3 days, my favorite food in the whole world, and so forth. At that age, there were a lot of occasions for punishment. And the punishments were cumulative. So there were some days where, at the end of the day, I tallied up that I wasn't allowed to play Civilization for the next 4 weeks. As you might imagine, this kind of mental horse trading didn't work so well. At age 15 or 16, I found myself losing interest in things around me. And at age 18, I started on what would be a years-long course of therapy and antidepressants. My freshman year of college, I dated a girl the first part of college, and I kissed 2 boys the entire year, and I pushed both of them away almost immediately, telling them both that I thought I had made a mistake. It wasn't until the summer after my freshman year of college that things changed. I was studying abroad in Brazil, and everything felt so new, so removed from my life back home, that I almost felt like a different person. I felt like I could try new things without endangering that life or the self that I had built around it. And the big thing I decided to try was sleeping with a guy. And it was in that new environment that I was finally able to acknowledge to myself that this was what I had been desiring all those years. So the morning after we hooked up, this guy walked me to the bus stop near the hotel. He was older than me, in his 20s, and he had been with lots of guys. He didn't even know how many. So to him, I was just some kid he was hooking up with. But to me, he represented something new, something special. I don't think I cried, but I definitely sniffled a little bit, and I said, "I'll never see you again." And he said, "You'll see me. It's destino, destiny." And he pulled this cheap metal ring off his finger, like the kind you used to get in grocery store vending machines, and he put it on mine, and we embraced. The bus came. I got on the bus, and I waved goodbye, and he stood there waving goodbye in the dawn as the bus climbed the hill, and I never saw him again. His name was João, the equivalent of John, and I never got his last name, so. But it was on that bus that I first said to myself, I am gay. And as I waited for that answering flood of internal denials and alternative explanations for why I just slept with a guy, twice, instead, there was silence, and I felt a kind of peace. So when I got back to the US, I sat my dad down to tell him, and my heart was pounding out of my chest. After a moment's silence, I got the words out. "Dad, I'm gay. And he said, you know, I will always love you just the same, no matter what. And I knew then that I was one of the lucky ones compared to people I knew, friends I had who had been beaten or thrown out of their homes. But that wasn't enough for me at that time. I wanted some acknowledgement of the anguish he had caused me all those years. I said, Dad, I was terrified to come out to you because you told me you would be disappointed in me if I turned out gay. At this, he looked shocked, hurt even. He said, I never said that. I would never say that. I said, Dad, you said exactly that. You said those words. And he shook his head. Alan, I'm sorry, you're misremembering. At age 19, I was still too afraid of my father to clearly express how I felt. I don't remember how the conversation ended, except that I left the living room feeling, as I so often felt with him, like I had been defeated. Over the next 3 years of college, I remember these recurring dreams of confrontation with my father. In real life, he's much bigger and taller than I am, but in the dreams, I was bigger than him, and I was yelling at him, making him cower back with fear. But in college, I also learned a lot about the mind. I took classes in psychology and cognitive science, and I learned that remembering is a reconstructive act, a creative one even. It's not like pulling a file from a drawer. Each time a memory is recalled, it's altered slightly, so in some sense, the memories we recall most often are the ones that are most fragile. So I was contemplating this at one point, and I suddenly thought to myself, oh my God, what if my dad was right? What if I had misremembered? Or even made this memory up entirely? What if he had never said those words? What if I had simply assumed, given all the ways that I felt inadequate before him, all the ways he seemed to disapprove of me, that he would also disapprove of my being gay? And there was a period when not knowing if this memory was real or not caused a whole new kind of anguish, because if my dad wasn't responsible for all those years of self-torment, then what was I supposed to do with all this anger I had towards him? You know, for a while it felt good to hold on to this anger. You know, it felt righteous. And it felt satisfying to imagine confronting him with it and extracting an apology for all the ways in which he had wronged me. But these dreams of confrontation didn't make me feel better, and they didn't exhaust themselves. Night after night, I woke up from the same basic dream, feeling shaken and wondering what I needed to do to make this stop. There's a poem that I love that begins, anger is a bitter lock, but it can be turned. What began to turn that lock for me was deciding that forgiveness was not going to be some sort of transaction between my father and me. Whatever he had said, if he had said anything, he hadn't meant to hurt me. I knew that. Nevertheless, I had been hurt, and deeply, and he knew that. I had to decide at some point, and perhaps he did too, that these truths were not incompatible. They could coexist, and we could carry them together and maintain a relationship. I have now, in the present, a loving father, a loving partner, and a wonderful life in this very gay city. The self-hating version of me is a ghost, as is the version of my father who may or may not have wanted his son to be gay. I wish them both peace.